honor for me to welcome Mikhail Gorbachev, who was leader of the Soviet Union during a time of truly revolutionary change, one that's especially significant to those of us who are partisans of freedom and democracy in the world. Et je voudrais aussi souhaiter la bienvenue à Pierre Trudeau, un autre personnage historique, bien de chez nous. Il était non seulement un leader du Canada, mais aussi du monde démocratique pendant 20 ans. I'd like also to introduce our colleagues here from McGill, Valentin Boss, historian, and Reuven Brenner, economist. So let me ask Pierre Trudeau to open the discussion by asking a question.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais commencer par une question d'ordre général sur l'ordre économique mondial, ou l'ordre mondial tout court, ce qu'on pourrait aussi appeler le désordre mondial. Depuis le traité de Westphalie en 1648 jusqu'à la fin de la guerre froide, l'ordre mondial était basé plus ou moins sur un équilibre des forces entre pays, entre blocs, entre alliances. Et avec la guerre froide, tout ça s'est concrétisé dans deux blocs principaux, l'Est et l'Ouest. Le bloc du pacte de Varsovie, le bloc de l'OTAN, chacun avec ses alliés, ses clientèles. Vous avez, cher Monsieur Gorbachev, changé tout ça. Vous êtes un grand réformateur. Vous avez révolutionné le paysage politique, puisque jusqu'à ce moment-là, la politique était essentiellement basée sur des notions militaires, l'OTAN, le pacte de Varsovie. Et tout à coup, vous avez, avec la démocratie, avec l'accès au marché libre, vous avez changé complètement la composition et la nature du bloc convenu d'appeler le bloc de l'Est. Mais ça n'a pas changé comme vous vouliez. Par exemple, vous vouliez garder une fédération forte, vous étiez sur la veille de la proclamer quand il y a eu le putsch. Vous vouliez aussi que les pays membres de l'ancienne Union soviétique aillent vers une forme d'indépendance, mais pas la souveraineté totale. Vous vouliez une fédération qui respecterait les identités locales, mais qui serait unie par une fédération véritable. Je pense que nous, à l'Ouest, nous avons un peu empêché ces choses en nous précipitant pour reconnaître l'indépendance d'un certain nombre de pays autrefois membres de l'Union soviétique. Par exemple, nous sommes un peu précipités pour reconnaître les pays baltes, ensuite l'Ukraine. Et l'exemple étant donné, ça s'est répandu très vite. La Géorgie, l'Azerbaïdjan et ailleurs dans le bloc dit de l'Est ou les blocs du tiers-monde, c'était le tour de la Yougoslavie. Vous vouliez aussi avoir une réforme progressive. Vous ne vouliez pas aller ce qu'on appelle la thérapie de choc. Vous vouliez une véritable thérapie, mais sans choc. Vous vouliez aller progressivement vers une économie de marché, mais décontrôler lentement, comme d'ailleurs les pays de l'Occident ont décontrôlé lentement après les contrôles imposés chez eux dans la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Vous demandiez également que le pacte de Varsovie et le pacte de l'OTAN disparaissent progressivement, alors qu'on vous a répondu non, nous allons continuer l'OTAN et l'Allemagne réunie sera membre de l'OTAN. Vous avez essayé, je crois avec raison, pendant la guerre du Golfe, de chercher une solution à ce conflit, une solution négociée, une solution pacifique qui imposerait si nécessaire des sanctions, mais vous cherchez une solution sans la guerre. Là aussi, on vous a dit non. Alors ma question, Monsieur Gorbachev, c'est comment envisagez-vous le nouvel ordre mondial? Si vous aviez pu agir avec la coopération des pays de l'Ouest, vous auriez est-ce que vous vous dites communiste? Vous êtes fièrement communiste, et si je comprends bien, dans le jargon actuel du glasnost et de la perestroïka, ça veut dire une forme de social-démocratie. Ma question est précise. Est-ce que cette social-démocratie est réalisable? Est-ce que vous pensez qu'elle peut revenir? Ou est-ce que vous jugez sévèrement la pensée de beaucoup d'Occidentaux, à savoir que l'histoire est finie, maintenant il y a un super grand, c'est les États-Unis d'Amérique avec d'autres pays qui rivalisent avec lui. C'est la fin de l'histoire, nous aurons un monde libéral basé sur le capitalisme et l'économie de marché. Vous-même, vous êtes communiste ou social-démocrate, est-ce qu'on peut y revenir ou est-ce que c'est mort, cette belle idéologie, dans un sens qu'elle était basée sur une volonté de justice, une volonté d'égalité, mais qui a failli, surtout à cause du stalinisme?
Yes, I see it's a continuation of our talk yesterday around 12 o'clock in the night. And I think we suggested we'd continue today, so it's a good chance to do so. I welcome this meeting. And I think that if right now we're behind in a few things since the Cold War ended, and since we left the confrontational period, we're missing a few things. We haven't been able to pool our intellectual forces in time to find ways to act in this new situation. And in fact, we were also in a euphoric situation when the Cold War ended. Confrontation came to an end. We have new chances, new opportunities to develop. And we thought it would all go just as easily as wink, that it would be automatic. I think that we were a bit careless, all of us. My own experience has shown that when a politician is late in doing something, that it's a very costly thing. When events become chaotic, the elements go out of control, as we put it, then even with healthy, spontaneous factors unfolding, nevertheless, there is much of destructive nature in that. After all, politics, the politicians with new, we could say a new arsenal of knowledge have to know how to deal with. So in this form of roundtable, as the respected Mr. Trudeau has said, disorder, I think that this is the correct way to put it. It's very typical of transition. But I think that this is a very important point, very beneficial. Right now, we've understood that we need to be more active and to understand that great responsibility that lies on our shoulders, because we must arm our politicians in the intellectual sense, our society, show them what is the best and most productive way to act in this situation. Yes, you're right, and I share that opinion, that when we ran into these factors, into these events, it was a trial for us to see how we would react to a new situation. There were two situations. The first was, for instance, the situation in Yugoslavia. I spoke with my partners. I said that they shouldn't allow all sorts of that they had to give the Yugoslavian people a chance to make their own decisions before they recognized the state. So they recognized Slovenia and Croatia, and as you see, the situation has unfolded very rapidly since then. I think that was an important moment. As far as the Soviet Union is concerned, Pierre, I must tell you that although we saw competition between the Western states, and the Prime Minister reminded me at one point it was like a gypsy band that was moving around the Soviet Union trying to put forward its position. But the most important point for the future of the Union and the unfolding process, I think they were all domestic factors, really. Most of all, there were major problems within the country that had to be reformed, major issues. It was called a federation, but it was never really a federation. It was a bureaucratic system, unitarian and rigid system. And when we started to begin democratization and glasnost, in order to fulfill our natural desires to be a sovereign state, we weren't ready for it when the peoples wanted to be sovereign. And ambitious politicians saddled this process, made use of it for their own interests. They exploited it. They exploited the interests of the different peoples in preserving their identity. And then there were separatist movements that arose. So as far as we're concerned, we got behind in policy. And the second point is a very powerful strike that was the coup in August, the August 1991 coup. Self-preservation came into play. Within 10 or 15 days, all of the states said that they would be proclaim themselves independent, and they predetermined the weakening of the state and its dissolution. But there's no way that I could say the meeting of the three leaders of the Slovenian republics, of the Slavic republics, in the Belarusian situation, the August coup put an end to the signing of the treaty. That's the Belarusian agreement.
That's the nub of the issue. For the future, for a new world order in the future, do you think that the international community is powerless before events like the civil war in Yugoslavia, like the quasi-civil war in Armenia and Azerbaijan? Is there a way that the international community can, in an ordered fashion, intervene? What do we very much like to have your opinion on that?
Ну, прежде всего, я думаю, что
Most of all, I think that we should keep the following in mind. We have to realize that the aspiration of the people to preserve their identity is just as objective a process. I mean, it's a natural process. There's nothing artificial about it. It's a natural movement, just as economic integration is. These are the two processes that we're seeing now. And the stronger the economic integration, the more people want to have that integration. And unfortunately, there's a danger that all of the differences between the people will be wiped out. And the people are afraid that their self-preservation is in danger. So we have to understand that these are two important trends right now that are in existence. After all, the Maastricht Treaty, what was the reaction to that? Denmark and France, I mean, they didn't want to approve these proposals. That's a difficult process too. After all, so many years passed, so many years of cooperation within the European Economic Community and between different structures. I think we have to find a way to combine, to work within the framework of these two tendencies. We can't just turn away or negate the people's interest in having their own identity. But we also can't let it be an unbridled process. We have to show them how essential it is. We know that they have to preserve their culture and language as a people, but it's also essential to work together, to integrate the peoples in order for civilization to successfully work together and to meet the challenges of the day. That's the first point. We really need a global understanding of this problem and its significance. Further, we have to return to the principles of federalism and what is the idea at its foundation and how can they be implemented today in a given situation. I think that here is the key to understanding and to resolution of this problem, which is implementing the federalism principles in a new context, a new reading of the principles. And I think then these problems can be resolved. Further, if in the final analysis a certain ethnic group definitely wants to have their own state entity, state formation, then I think we have to have a code, a procedural code, a code of conduct. How can we carry out this process? What are the stages? What's the time frame for resolving these issues? It can't all come at once like a landslide or like a mudslide. We really have to, in that case, we'd have to take emergency action. Here we need a code of conduct. For instance, if there's an election or a part of the country has decided simply to form its own state, then there has to be a certain period for carrying out that change. Ownership, questions of ownership, human rights, all of this has to be considered, discussed, and then maybe, as a result of that, the decision might be taken back. Unfortunately, Landsbergis in Lithuania was not ready. Brazauskas was in agreement with you on that, in order to set up a federal structure that would be supported by those who had a reasonable approach to minority issues. And I think that what's happening now in Lithuania is that we're seeing other people following that first wave of nationalism. But that first wave was brutal at times. Is it possible to coordinate or to hold back that form of nationalism? After all, in Central Asia, we've also seen cruelty. I think that we have to be unequivocal, very decisive in supporting the natural aspiration to preserve identity, a people's identity, a rebirth of the different nations. We have to recognize that, and each ethnic group has to understand that it can't be replaced, that it's irreplaceable, and that the whole world community recognizes that. But also we have to be decisively against nationalism, which is often used as an instrument for carrying out political aims. Elite groups, for instance, that have political ambitions, and it's a method for them to simply exploit this wonderful phenomenon that is national identity. And I think in that sense, we should be unanimous that there definitely is a danger in nationalism, and we have to say that openly, and we should be against those dangerous trends. But never say that it's equal, that the people's aspirations to preserve their independence, their way of life, their traditions, their culture, and to confuse that with indifferent nationalists who care not for those interests. They have their own goals, their own program. That's what I think. Now, you've touched upon the question of mechanisms. How will this be done? Well, I think in that sense, the UN has not fulfilled its complete potential. And it was created to do that, after all. It was created to have some order in international relations, to make them manageable. It's not that we want to set up a world government. I mean, I think that would be a misconception for sure. But the UN, which as a result of the Cold War was in a state of inefficacy, let's say. But I think now her time has come. Its time has come. The structure, institutions of this organization during the Cold War were so changed that we really have to modernize that organization. And at the same time, I think that there have to be regional systems which would allow these issues to be resolved. For instance, I hope very much that within the CSCE, these mechanisms will arise, and I come up often with an idea of a role for the Security Council. Mitterrand and for instance, has supported and said that the General Secretary of the SCSE could fulfill these roles in certain situations when it's needed. It would be a way of taking the punch out of the conflicts before they take enough, they gather momentum. So we have to see the reality here, and we have to see the danger and create the theoretical preconditions for an understanding. You have to give people understanding, new understanding of the world, in order for the ethnic issue to remain non-destructive. We have to have a mechanism.
The crucial issue, the issue of minorities. In a way, world history has been here before. After the 1914-18 war, we had in Europe anyway, the declaration of the principle of self-determination, and these new states were created, and essentially the world order came apart, partly on the issue of the treatment of minorities, which really was never adequate, was never satisfactory. And now the same thing seems to be happening in certain parts of the world. In Yugoslavia, as is notably the case, and in many parts of many republics of the former Soviet Union, and particularly with the population so spread out in different republics. In a sense, what the world needs is a code of minorities, a code whereby any sovereign state has to treat its minorities according to certain principles. But do you envisage that that could actually be enforced by a world order, by, let's say, the United Nations, maybe, as you suggest, delegating authority in certain cases to regional bodies, but by some kind of international body that could actually enforce?
You could at least, pourrait au moins obtenir que les pays tiers ne reconnaissent pas l'indépendance d'un État, à moins qu'il ait déjà entériné ses principes de respect des minorités.
Знаете, я думаю, что уходить от этой проблемы не надо.
I think that we shouldn't turn our backs on this problem. In the first place, I think that we haven't exhausted the potential of autonomous entities. That's a status that allows a given entity, which does not want to be an independent state, but which has the right to have a certain form of national culture, which would allow it to preserve its history and culture, its independence in that sense, and to consolidate that minority. But I think that's a problem that can be dealt with, and it can be dealt with in the sense that the mechanism for division of powers between the center and the regions. It'll be a compact existence of these entities, let's put it that way. That's a possible resolution. It's a status that could entail certain rights, and that would be stimulated by self-regulation. And it would also combine favorably with the center, it wouldn't run counter to the interests of the center. I think there are very unexpected ways of resolving this problem. When, in essence, after the October Revolution, each province was setting up its own republic, mine as well, by the way, Stavropolska province, and not just under the guidance of Lenin, under the leadership of Lenin or Morozov, which was the Council of People's Commissars. They wanted to set up these republics, but Lenin was a Unitarian, unitarist. He knew that this desire existed, but he said, let's try an alliance. And he was very much for that alliance. And that's how he preserved Russia from falling apart. Because they took the route of a federation, a federative state. But at the same time, during Lenin's era, there were more than 5,000 national regions, as they were called, within Russia, where these small, compact entities, let's call it ethnic entities, were looking after their interests. When Stalin came to power, the federation was buried. It was called a federation, but it was buried. And these national entities were liquidated. They were destroyed as such. And that was a terrible blow to everything that was being done by Lenin, to everything that Lenin had formed and created. So I think that we have to find, and I think it's possible to find resolution. But it's not enough to say, to denounce, to say, no, that's not good enough, you will do what the majority will do. That's no way to go. No, but at the same time, we have to clearly make it clear that we can't make these aspirations an absolute ideology. You know, the right to self-determination has to also play a role along with other factors. For instance, natural political tendencies. In the pre-Baltics, for instance, or Central Asia, it's very hard to deal with that. Yes, I think the processes in the former Soviet republics are very difficult to follow. They have a different mentality, a different culture. In the Central Asian republics, for instance, what we're seeing is, in fact, the rebirth of traditions that have been forgotten. Yes, that's happening. And also, I think the situation will unfold in such a way that the people who are on the crest of the wave of destruction of the Union, I think that they will leave the scene. Because the tendency right now is centrifugal. The centrifugal tendency is gaining momentum. They're talking about confederation. Maybe it'll be several republics, and then if others want to join, they will. And then there'll be differentiated links between the parts of this alliance. Some will be economic, some will be political. I think there are many different scenarios here. The important thing is for us to see this in time and to facilitate the process. Because I mentioned that the Russian leadership are missing that possibility. They've missed their chance, or they are missing it. I think that there has to be initiative on the part of Russia. Much depends on that. You know, there's much in what happened between Russia and the Ukraine. On the level of the peoples, there's no conflict. There isn't that isolation or that alienation.
There could be a new federation between, let's say, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan. Not necessarily all the republics of the former Soviet Union, but a new federation among those in our lifetime. I'm not talking about the 21st, 22nd century, but soon.
Well, if it happens, it's not going to be with the center in Russia. It'll be on an equal basis. It will be voluntary. That has to be the way. That has to be mandatory. Since the August coup, when they saw how the Russian leadership has taken certain steps that look a bit like imperial actions. I think that the republics are putting themselves at a distance from the center. They want some kind of alliance with a center, but federation in the sense that we perceived it before the August coup won't work. Not right away, anyway. It's not a union. It'll be an alliance of states with their own institutions, economic, social defense institutions. It'll be a very long process, but that's okay as long as it's voluntary and it's the people's choice. Not that it's they're going to be forced to enter an alliance. Do you deal with the problem of the constitution right now in Moscow? A real constitution, a permanent one, it doesn't exist in Ukraine, in Belarus, in the other republics. And this constitutional phase is very important. Have we passed that already, or? No, I don't think I can agree with that statement. I mean, without a constitution, a state cannot exist, after all. But you shouldn't forget that a constitution has a certain established form of state formations, division of powers, and all of that is right now at the stage of just the beginning, the stage of search for solutions. So we can't make a constitution right now that tomorrow will be no good. So on the basis of the old constitutions, I think we should make modifications in those, and then arrive at a certain stage where it's possible to go on. And I think we're at that stage right now. Other republics are approaching it. It's possible to set up a new constitution. What do you think, presidential or parliamentary constitution is best? I think that Russia should have a strong executive power, because Russia cannot be managed if the problem of freedom to the regions has not been resolved. Because you can't run a state like that, a republic like that, from Moscow. And naturally, you have to have a strong parliament, but in that event, there has to be a balance of power between the center and the regions, between the legislative and the executive powers. Now, I can see that this balance exists in the institution of presidential power. But I see, once again, both a positive and bitter experience in that. Well, de Gaulle, you say. I think that de Gaulle is worth remembering. It's worth having.
Do you think that current events in the Kremlin enhance the centrifugal power, that the states will become more independent? And is it a problem that would imply that Russia will have to give up its status of military superpower? Is that one of the reasons that there is opposition?
Well, if you have in mind that a superpower is only based on military power, then I don't think that suits us as Russians. We need a superpower that's based on a different economy, on stability, reliable stability within the country, and on adequate defense. I think that's what the formation of Russia will be based on as a new superpower. As for the first part of the question, as I understood it, you would like to clarify how the present situation will affect the formation of a Russian federation and the reform process. Well, I think that if this reform process is drawn out, and if it's confrontational between political battalions, and that will have an effect on all the processes within Russia, because Russia is now at the point in its reforms where it's a critical point where many very important solutions are being found to approach a market economy, social orientation of the economy, And I think in that sense, the regions are not satisfied that at the federal level, we've got this confrontation. They're looking for agreed actions from politicians and a policy that will allow the republics and all of Russia a good future. And those structures that we work with in Russia are not capable of generating an agreed policy that would open the doors to an exit from the crisis situation. So I think we need elections.
You mentioned that there are various possible ways and sequence of events that can integrate people. Some are political and some are economic. And although there has been many attempts done to integrate them politically, relatively less was done to integrate them economically. And by that, I mean the following. For example, today only 3% of the land is privatized, and that 3% supplied about 25% of the food. Now, when a few years ago already it was known that China followed the following model, that it privatized land and it also allowed free zones. And that was the source of prosperity. Now, I know that you frequently expressed your opinion that you don't think that some countries should emulate other countries' models. Yes, in the planned referendum, which meanwhile was cancelled, Mr. Yeltsin, one of the questions that Mr. Yeltsin intended to ask was private ownership of land. Do you think that this is where reform should start in 1993?
Прежде всего, я
Well, above all,
настаивать на следующем.
I would like to insist on the following. In China, reform should be done a la Chinese, and in Russia they should be done a la Russian. Because since January 1993, it's been going a la Harvard. And that has led to the culture of the whole social structure has renounced this mentality because they don't understand the whole context of the reforms. And that's why they've been defeated. And I think in Russia, the reforms have to be revolutionary. And I think that counting on collectivization in the beginning was a mistake, and on monopoly of state ownership, same point. I think that denationalization and privatization across the board is not realistic and is not a proper orientation. I think we have to reaffirm freedom and equality of ownership, all forms of ownership, and also free choice for the people of their form of economy. Let people choose, because I'm sure that there will be a mixed economy, not just in the transitional period, but in the future as well. I think there will be a mixed economy. That's part of the Russian tradition. So artificially imposing a structure on them, like Stalin did during the collectivization, it smells of Stalinism. It's not democratic reform, where they try to forcefully give people a good life. You have to form the preconditions, and people have to make their own decision. They know what's good and what's bad, and so they'll voluntarily, independently make their decision. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about preconditions. And the second point is that we have to move most of all towards privatization of small and medium-sized business in trade, service, in the land reform. Here there's great potential, but as far as the land is concerned, this is the question of land. For Russians, it's not a simple question. It doesn't just mean that you get a little plot of land where you're going to grow corn or wheat or rye or oats. it's a question for Russians of his own feeling of statehood. The land is, for him, or for the Russians, it's a value that's irreplaceable for them, extremely important. And it's not something that should be speculated with. As you know, since serfdom ended, it wasn't the peasants who received the land, but peasant associations. And they gave per capita to each male a certain amount of land. So you get three-tenths of a hectare to each male in the family as soon as they were born. And the land was used 5 or 7 years later. For instance, the association would decide how to distribute. They say, well, you had a plot over here. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Well, we're going to give you another one here in a different spot. Yes, and you remember how painful all that was. And all the more so during the Soviet era. And within the framework of Russia, I think the process of land reform will take different forms in different regions. And then, when we were discussing the land reform, and the idea was to hold a referendum on ownership of land, whether to recognize it as a viable solution or not. The Uzbek leadership, and not just the leadership, were against privatizing the land, against introducing private ownership. Why? Because they have irrigated land. The whole system is irrigated. All of their system is based on that. It's okay for them to lease it, to be able to inherit lease rights, everything that is involved with that is fine, but not ownership, because the whole land, the whole country, for the Uzbeks, is built on that system, because for them, when water ends, everything ends. In Russia, there will be different features to the land reform, and I think there'll be big differences. It depends where you are. In the center of Russia is one thing. If you're closer to Belarus or Pskov or to the south of Russia, they'll take different forms. But I want the Constitution to fix the right to choice. If the people want that, then I welcome that. There should be a master on the land, whether it's through lease rights, which would give the farmers put the land at his complete disposal, and to allow inheritance or to resale of leasing rights. That's fine. We can envisage all of that. Or if they want to privatize, then we should ask them if they want to. The urban population wants to have privatization of land. They want to have their own, whereas the farmers are against it, the rural areas. We have to use the land properly in Russia. I'm sorry, just one moment. In certain parts of the railway lines along the border in Army, along the border, there are many, many hectares, millions of hectares of land. So this reform will allow those who want to organize farmer associations, let them do it.
That's exactly the advantage of a federal system, in principle, that you allow states to compete with various arrangements. So let's say if Uzbekistan doesn't want to try it, then they don't try it, but another republic which votes for it can try it, and then you see which one succeeds within 5 years, and then that's how people learn one from the other. So it's.
Я согласен с вами.
Yes, I agree with you on that.
Pierre.
And Pierre, incidentally, in his introduction, brought up so many issues and questions that I can't possibly ignore them, although I don't know if I have time to answer them all. Of course, you brought up the theme of how the West has compromised or has... I think that's a just question, because
строительство нового миропорядка у нас еще
setting up a new world
на
order
первоначальной стадии.
is something
И
that's
нам
right
нужно
now at the
взаимодействовать.
first stages, and we
Нужно
have to work together
взаимодействовать, исходя из того, что
on the basis of
все мы равны
the fact that we're all equal,
и действуем по одним
and that we
стандартам и
act on
правилам.
one standard and according to the
Я
same
думаю,
rules.
для строительства
And I think
нового
that for
мирового порядка
building a new world order,
неприемлемо, что
it's
или одна
unacceptable
страна, или какая-то
to
группа
have
стран
one country or a group of
диктовать свои
countries
условия.
to
Вот так,
dictate
по
their
такому образцу, по
conditions,
такому
to say, okay,
стандарту
this is the way it's going to be done,
должен
this is the
построить.
standard, this is
Нет,
the way the world
новый
order will
мир
be
мы
done.
должны
No,
сотворить
we have to
вместе.
make this
И я
new world
возвращаюсь
together.
снова к Организации Объединенных Наций.
And I return to
И
the
я ставлю
UN on that.
вопрос о
I think
необходимости
the question
развития
should be
региональных
put
структур, которые бы
of setting up
содействовали
regional
региональном
structures
плане
to
становлению
facilitate
нормальных
the formation of
Но
proper interaction and proper
для этого
relationships on the regional level.
должно быть понимание во всех частях
But I
мира,
think there has to be an
что
understanding
мы, в
throughout the
общем-то,
world
должны все
that
меняться.
we all have to
Я должен
change.
сказать,
And I
ждали
must say
изменений от
that we
Советского Союза.
expected changes from the Soviet
Внутри,
Union,
через реформы,
both
и
domestically
во
through
внешней
reform
политике
and in
через
external policy, foreign policy,
новое мышление, как мы
through the
это
new
провозгласили.
thinking, as we
Да, мы
called it.
считали, что нам нужно
Yeah.
проявить инициативу.
Yes, we thought that we had to
Во-первых,
show the initiative.
огромная ответственность наша, во-вторых, кому-то надо
We
начинать.
had a great responsibility on our
дальше
shoulders.
процесс
Somebody
может
had to
идти
begin.
только
But now the
через
process
встречи,
has to begin
взаимопонимание.
only with compromises and mutual
И
understanding.
если кто-то собирается
If somebody
себя поставить
right
в
now
положение
is planning
человека с корзинкой, который ходит и
to
не только собирает готовые
say that,
собранные
okay,
грибы
here
или
I am and I'm
себе
going to collect
результаты.
these
Нет,
berries that are
это
already
неприемлемо.
well grown and
Здесь
simply make use of the
только
results,
можно
ready-made.
всё
No, these results
попытаться
aren't there.
сделать,
We have to
понимая,
work
что
together,
мы
understanding that we're equal subjects involved in creating a new world order, a new civilization. And what I would say
Когда
is,
я услышал,
when I heard
зазвучали голоса, что
voices
нанесено поражение коммунизму,
saying that
что
communism has been
холодную
defeated,
войну
that the
выиграли
Cold War
западные страны,
was won by the
и так
Western
далее.
countries, etc.
Я должен сказать, это
I really must say
очень поверхностное
that that's
суждение,
so
рассчитанное или на
superficial.
предвыборные кампании, или
It's either
на
for a
популизм
campaign,
политический.
an
Это
election
серьезные
campaign, or
политики я не
simply a
могу
populist
отнести к таким
approach,
суждениям.
because
Мы все
serious
в холодной
politicians couldn't
войне
possibly think that way.
проиграли,
We all
и прежде всего
lost the
Соединенные
Cold
Штаты
War,
Америки
particularly the
и
US
Советский Союз,
and the Soviet
и
Union.
все мы выиграли,
And
выйдя
all
из
of we
холодной
have
войны.
won, all of us have
Вот
won by leaving
это, я
that
думаю,
period.
научная констатация,
And I think
научный
that that is a scientific
Это, во-первых.
conclusion. That's
И,
the first
во-вторых,
thing. And secondly,
что значит победил
what does it mean
капитализм,
to have
и
capitalism
он
victorious,
теперь мы должны
and that we
в этом обществе
must now in this capitalist society? Mind you, I don't know where there is a capitalist state in actually in existence. Who can show me, please? Is Canada a capitalist system?
Что, Германия капиталистическая?
Germany? A capitalist state? Oh, hardly.
Характеристики все из старого лексикона.
This is
И
from
всё
our
это
old
поддается слишком идеологии.
lexicology, from our old
А мы должны делать
vocabulary.
научный анализ.
We have to do a scientific,
Так вот,
that's all on the level of emotions.
я
We have to
думаю,
do
что
a
если
scientific
говорить,
analysis.
что потерпело поражение,
If we're going to say what was defeated, socialism. No, socialism wasn't defeated. The Stalin model, utopian model, imposed upon this whole country and other countries by repressive methods and supported by the totalitarian regime. Yes, that was defeated, and domestically for the most part,
ибо она лишила кислорода и социальной энергии общества.
because it took away the oxygen from society.
Если вы мне будете доказывать,
But
что
if you tell me
отныне никакого значения не имеют
that there is no
наших рассуждений
significance in our search or our considerations or our thoughts about a future society, I think that all human values have no place there, then I can't agree with that. I think everything that we have put together, all of our experience and the experience of our society, will be a fusion of these cultures and these. I think the most important historic victory was over Stalinism. And therefore, I was very interested in your statement. It was a number of years ago, But despite your attainments, you said that Stalinism is still alive. What did you mean by that? Well, what I mean when I say that it's alive is that within the society, those forces still exist in the mentality of people. The faith in a leader, that he has to decide everything for them. There's all sorts of speculation on that on the part of the current leadership, and they all think that they're all powerful and that the leadership can decide everything. That is a dead end. And that isn't the only thing that Stalinism manifests itself in. Democratic transformations in the interests of the people, if they are to be done by breaking people over their knee without paying any attention at all to their material state of being, to make all of them very poor, then that is Stalinism. That is a system that doesn't care for the people at all. It's a state where you're just a cog in the wheel. You're no one. And there again, you have a leader who, once again, patronizes the people. If you want to call yourself a Democrat, then you have to take care, be concerned with having the reform lead to political, legal, social preconditions. I'd even say ideological preconditions, spiritual preconditions, for raising human beings to a level of freedom, to freedom of choice that would preserve and uphold its interests, so that in place of political dictatorship, we have a dictatorship of law. In that case, that is fine. Otherwise, all you can see in this is Stalinism. In an interview, I was asked, was it at the press conference? No, it was here in Canada. Yes, that's right. Is it possible for the Bolsheviks to come back to power? I said, well, they're in power right now. Well, I said, what do you mean? Because what they're doing was done by the Bolsheviks in the same way, without taking into account the interests of the people. As if they were gods. We're going to manipulate the people, put them into a labor force, and then left, right, left, order them around. That smells of Bolshevism and Stalinism, and nothing else. And the interviewer didn't like that. I think, you think that Yeltsin is Stalin? No, I said, didn't say he was Stalin. I said that he uses Stalinist methods. And Hezbollah, definitely.
You mentioned two things. One is the word equal, that to be treated as equal. Do you think that Russia should participate at the G7 meetings? And if so, let's say, do you think that also India and China? And the other question, what can the West or Russia do to prevent arms from being sold to volatile regions? And then after that, I shall have a question about scientific.
Oh, yes, okay. Of course. But I can answer the first question very simply. If we want to demonstrate that we are now entering a new world order, and that there is no division between the West and East as there was in the past, and that a grouping such as the G7 exists, then to demonstrate changes in the functioning of that institution as a result of the participation of Russia, I think that's a very important factor. Let Russia be, for the moment, a participant, a beginner, let's put it that way, in the field. But I think that it would be a very big step.
Si vous voulez participer au G7, devenez capitaliste. C'est tout simple. Et vous avez dit.
Ну, я не считаю, что во Франции капитализм. Я не знаю, я не считаю,
I don't consider that France is capitalist or Germany is capitalism in its pure form. I think there is a lot of social democracy in their system.
Respect to private ownership. In that sense, that is the tenet of capitalism.
А я не думаю. Да нет, я не думаю, что
No, I don't
собственность
think that
определяет,
ownership determines, the form of ownership determines the nature of the system. I think it's the state or the condition of the human being within that system, how socially or democratically he is well provided for, or how humane the system is. I think those are the characteristics of a system that determine what type of system it is. I think we should renounce those foundations now. Pierre and I were speaking yesterday that about the Caribbean crisis. John Kennedy said one thing when he welcomed representatives of the minorities, the ethnic, the First Nations. And they said, look how many people are come from other continents. He listened to them very carefully, and he said, okay, well, let's begin with making our time right now and the future just. So let's not talk about capitalism and socialism. And let's not lose our intellect waste our intellect on that. Let's see what the new civilization should be like at the turn of the 21st century, and taking into account the challenges that exist, the global challenges, the problems of achieving freedom, the powerful processes that have taken hold of whole continents. I mean, there may be difficulties, there may be possible breakdowns in the process, but it's a fact. Let's think about that.
Il n'y a pas un régime social-démocratique dans les pays de l'Ouest qui puisse se passer des banques. Et si les banques n'aiment pas sa politique, le gouvernement socialiste tombe. Je pense que le socialisme que vous voulez bâtir n'est pas celui-là. Mais quel est-il? Je vous ai demandé au tout début, quel est, quand vous dites je suis communiste, moi, Mikhail Sergeyevich, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Vous avez dit, bon, économie mixte, vous avez dit mesures sociales, un peu plus de justice. Très bien, mais dites-nous alors que vous êtes social-démocrate dans le sens des pays de l'Ouest, dans les pays occidentaux. Et alors, justement, on est à la fin de l'histoire parce que tout le monde s'entend sur le capital, sur une certaine justice, mais tout le monde s'entend également que l'État favorise d'abord le capital. C'est une philosophie qui dit qu'il faut le capital pour produire, tandis que le marxisme, le communisme qu'on aimait, pas celui de Staline, c'est celui qui disait non, les ouvriers peuvent prendre en charge leur destinée, ils peuvent être les propriétaires de l'usine, ils doivent même être propriétaires de leur destinée. Et quand on vous demande quelle est votre idéologie économique, ça me paraît bien. C'est un peu comme mon libéralisme à moi, libéralisme d'Amérique du Nord, du Canada. C'est une forme de capitalisme tempéré par un effort de l'État de redistribuer la richesse. Mais la richesse est toujours produite par les capitaux, ce n'est pas produit par les ouvriers. Ce sont des ouvriers, ce sont des engagés. Alors, c'est peut-être la seule voie possible, mais je pense qu'il devrait y avoir dans le monde des théoriciens quelque part qui devraient essayer d'élaborer quelque chose de peut-être plus généreux dans son essence, de plus égalitaire que le système capitaliste tel que nous le connaissons.
Well, above all, I answer the question about myself. People ask me, what are you exactly, Mr. Gorbachev? Social, democrat, communist, socialist, liberal, whatever. I don't think that we'll ever get rid of these old concepts. I think it's time to reject them, because we're in a different world now. And I think we should be talking about new values that we can and should discuss and then transform our theoretical foundations of politics, and to head for a new civilization. I don't think these are thought up concepts of a new civilization. I think it's a it can't be said. Those people who represent the liberal tendencies can't be said to that their teachings can resolve everything. No, we know that right now. The thing is that many liberal movements have been more flexible than the socialist movement. Liberals were very quick to adapt to the situation, and they were able to make use of the social and values, socialist values, and they worked together with Lenin to stimulate, they worked in a partnership to stimulate the economy and not to lead to a great differentiation or of the straight of society, where you've got polarization like a north and south, or which enter into a confrontation, which is the class struggle. So that's how we had a socially oriented system, economy, role of the state. So I think that all of that is very important to see and understand. And I'd like to repeat that I don't see and I don't consider in the near future, for instance, the 21st century, that the choice is socialism or capitalism. I think the choice has to be for a new civilization, which would organically incorporate within itself on the basis of everything that we have renounced and understood, renounced and tried, and has taken from what is good, those values that we can apply. No, I don't think that the principles of ownership, and as we know, they are the ones that create stimulus. But we, in embracing privatization, we can't get along without social democracy. We can't get along without freedom. We can't get along without tolerance for other people's opinions. If that system rejects the need for equality.
We've come to the end of our time. I regret it very much. It's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. I want to thank my colleagues, Professors Boss and Brenner, and I want to thank Pierre Trudeau. And above all, I want to thank you very much, Mikhail Gorbachev, for being with us today for this marvelous discussion. Thank you very much.